All right. Good evening. Happy Thursday. Welcome to your weekly dose of astronomy. You're here for your little celestial tour around our neighborhood. I'm Irene Pease, your friendly neighborhood astronomer. Excited to talk about Novae this week. If you want to know more about what I'm doing or not doing, you can check out all about that at friendlyneighborhoodastronomer.com. If you've been watching these for a while, you may have noticed that I'm not doing the weekly skies thing as part of the Thursday evening. That's kind of moved to its separate thing that's just being posted on a YouTube channel on Sundays. So check those out. And if you have requests or questions about anything in the night sky, feel free to drop a note. Um, for the visuals that we're looking at tonight, we have Open Space, which you see in the background right now. You can find and download that for free at openspaceproject.com. And also, at some point a little bit later, we'll be using Stellarium, which you can find at stellarium.org. So I tried this view of open space a few weeks back now, like about a month or so ago, and I'm trying it again because I think it's just fun. Open space is pretty great, and I encourage people who have the resources to use it. Again, it's free, but it helps to have like a pretty solid graphics card. So this is kind of a behind the scenes in open space. So you'll get to see some of what I'm doing in the controls this week. So yay, so much fun. So Novae, there was a recurrent nova that went off just this last week, and so I thought we could talk about Novae, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about supernovae, and I'll talk a little bit about data and open space, and you'll see some of what I'm talking about in here because of actually doing like my live controls. Um, uh-oh, did I already break a thing? No, I didn't break a thing. Oh, good. I like it when I don't break things. So first of all, what we're not talking about, except we're going to talk about them, are supernovae. So we're just going to go ahead and zoom out a bit away from the Earth, turn on the orbits of the planets for a little bit of reference so we can see just how far away from the solar system we're getting. And really, we want to kind of zoom out and see what's happening out in the plane of the galaxy, out a little further. There's a galaxy here somewhere. There it is. All right. So there we are out on one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way galaxy. Um, and I just want to turn on a data set. And sorry, I'm getting a bit of lag. um, and there's a suggestion, I guess, trying Redshift on an iPad. So I'll have to check that out. Tip from John and Facebook. See what that looks like. Um, so what am I looking for? I'm looking for our supernova remnants, which are probably below the streams. Supernova remnants. So these are these red dots. If you can see all the red dots in there, I'll try to make them a little bit bigger because I know sometimes we have resolution issues. So in our kind of object tree here, we have um, options for all of the different objects. So I can try and make these a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's kind of a lot bigger. And then we'll just close that off. So these are leftovers from supernovas. So different types of supernovas, but generally supernova is what happens either to a really massive star when it dies off and kind of explodes all over the places. It's a mostly destructive event. Um, so if we have like a really, really massive star, uses up its nuclear fuel, and there's an implosion, explosion, you get gas and whatnot spattering all over the local galaxy there, expanding out into this nebula. That's what these supernova remnants are. And then the core of the star is severely compressed. So you have a neutron or possibly a pulsar in there. So that's what happens to massive stars when they die off. Um, that's one type of supernova. The another type of supernova, which of course we're not talking about, but then obviously I am talking about because I'm mentioning it, is a type 1a supernova. And this is a little bit more relevant. Type 1a supernovas are actually what we call standard candles. they have a very specific light curve, which means that they get, if we plot their light, their brightness, as a function of time, it has a very specific shape to it. This shape, which you can find on Wikipedia. So the black line here, you can see that's the 1A. So if we measure the light coming off of a point as a function of time and it has this little shape to it, you can see it brightens over a few days, reaches its peak luminosity. That's the zero, where it gets to its brightest point. And then it tapers off, but it tapers off in a certain way. So those are very specific objects that are exploding. And because they're all exactly the same, this light curve, this plot of the brightness, the absolute magnitude or the total actual brightness as a function of time looks the same for them. So these are basically white dwarf stars that reach a certain mass, 1.4 solar masses, or 1.4 times the mass of our sun, and then they have this envelope of hydrogen gas that ignites, and it's enough to make them explode. It's just that they explode at that point. But using those exploding stars, we've been able to figure out the distances to a lot of these galaxies. So all these dots here are galaxies. Um, on average, there's about one supernova of this type per galaxy per century. So we've been watching the skies for quite a while, and so we've been able to see supernovae go off in a lot of these. Um, and so we can use that as one way to measure the distances, because if we know how bright something actually is, which we can tell because it's a type 1A supernova, and we know how bright it looks because it looks fainter if it's further away, then we can compare those two things and we can actually figure out how far away it is. So that's how we use standard candles. So that's another thing that's not a nova, um, but that's an important thing in astronomy. So, and it has to do with white dwarfs. So, the thing that I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about tonight are other things that involve white dwarfs, and those are the novae. Um, so I still have my supernova remnants in here. So I'm gonna come over here. Sorry, I'm a little bit laggy. And I'm gonna turn off the supernova remnants and I'm gonna turn on another data set, the planetary nebulae. Little blue triangles. And because I can, I'll make them slightly larger blue triangles. So these planetary nebulae, these all have white dwarfs in them. So it's kind of white dwarf night, really, just looking at where do we have white dwarfs in the sky. Um, so these are whoa, way too big there. Um, these are all regions in space where we had a small, medium-sized star similar to our sun, and that star used up its nuclear fuel and puffed off its outer layers of gas, and the core of the star that's left behind is a white dwarf. So it's very dense matter. And this is what our sun will do in a few billion years or so. Notice that these are, again, mostly aligned with the plane of the galaxy. They're not like way off the plane in the halo, but mostly confined to our galactic plane. So, all of these white dwarfs that are in the centers of all these planetary nebula, again, these triangles are technically marking the planetary nebula, but when you think planetary nebula, I want you to think, oh, there's a white dwarf in the middle. Um, true story, a lot of these stars have companions. So our sun is kind of odd being like the size it is and just being like a single star. A lot of the stars in the galaxy have, binary or multiple star systems. And so if you have two stars and one, goes through this phase before the other one, eventually the other one will get around to, swelling up into the red giant and then, moving towards this other the phase where it kind of blasts off its outer layers of gas, moving on its way to becoming a white dwarf also. But one of the stars is going to do that first. So a lot of systems out there have binary systems where you have a white dwarf and then you have its red giant companion. So they're just in that stage of their life, and so um, that red giant companion can share its material, right? I mean, gravity's still a thing between the two stars. And so the red giant companion could be sharing material with the white dwarf, or the white dwarf, you could think of its gravity as like pulling material from the red giant. And eventually, like enough material builds up on it that it ignites and it kind of flashes off this really, really bright light. So that's our nova. So nova is just like a like a new new star basically. Nova being new. Um so these new stars, in some cases we only see them once, but in some cases we see them going off again and again. So we have recurring nova that some people like to study. And there was a recurring nova that we just saw um, just like a week or so ago. So that's kind of a neat thing. And I want to encourage people to go outside and check it out. Um, so I'll show you where that is in just a moment. Again, I'm not actually showing Nova here, but these are some possible candidates for going Novae eventually, not in our lifetimes, but if any of these white dwarfs basically have companions, they could flare up at some point. And if they do this recurrently, if they keep gaining more and more mass, if this happens again and again, and they reach that magical number, the 1.4 solar masses, then they could eventually go supernova, and all that excitement. Um, so just because I worked really hard on it and didn't quite succeed, but I worked really hard on it, I wanted to share one other partial data set. So we'll turn off the planetary nebulae and we'll come in a lot closer to the Earth and see if I can find them in here. Um, so I kind of cobbled together some white dwarfs. So pulling data from Rostat, I guess gathered by Fleming et al. 1996. Um, and instead of actually putting it into its own um, data set in open space, I just made a file in the streams, the Stellar Streams. If you didn't see the Stellar Streams episode, go back and watch the Stellar Streams episode. And I didn't actually get all of them in here because I couldn't find both coordinates and distances for all of them. And then when I did find them, I realized that I didn't have quite the right coordinate system. So I managed to convert the RA deck and a distance to XYZ, but I didn't need RA deck. I needed different coordinates that I think are aligned with the ecliptic and not the celestial equator. Oops. But here's a data set that could be rotated to represent a few of the white dwarfs in our celestial neighborhood. So, just a fun project and just like a quick plug for open space. Like, if you like tinkering around with data, like this is the kind of stuff that you can do. You can actually like put together data sets and stick them in here and like fly around in 3D. So these should be the coordinates for just a handful of the white dwarfs that I was able to cobble together. But again, they're kind of off relative to the stars because one of them is at Sirius B, so the brightest star in our night sky that is in the constellation Canis Major. We can turn on the Canis Major image. Um, that has that has a white dwarf companion. Um, so if we fly in here, this is basically how I know that my data wasn't set up right. So I'm just going to go ahead and try. I think that's my cue for turning on a few of the constellation lines. If we look, um, where's our white dwarf? Yep, there it is. So there is Sirius in the night sky. That's great. That's the dog star. Again, it's the brightest star in our night sky. It's not too terribly far away. It's 2.2 parsecs, which is that times about 3.25 light years. Um, But when I turned on my white dwarf data set, didn't quite match up. So so that was a little off, but that's okay. But it was a fun activity for me. So, so yes, you can find white dwarfs online. You can find novas online, and of course, the really important thing is where can you find a nova in the sky, right? So for that, we're gonna hop on over to the Stellarium, and we're gonna check out. Um, oh yeah, Stellarium. All right, so I forgot to download my cheat sheet, but someone did image it. There's a really beautiful image by Philip Romanov. Took a great picture where you can see exactly where it is. So I'm just gonna pull up some of our constellations. So this is kind of the sky tonight, about an hour from now. So if people are going to be out watching the Perseids, I'll just fast forward it a little bit because it's peak night of Perseids. Go check them out if it's clear near you. North of the Scorpion is the constellation Ophiuchus. It's the Serpent Bearer. So this guy with the serpent on either side. So Serpens cauda, Serpens caput. I forget which is which. That's what Wikipedia is for. Um, but yeah, so up in around in here, so it's actually you can look up the coordinates for it. Right ascension 17 uh, hours 50 minutes 13.2 seconds, and declination negative 6:42:28. So it's kind of up in here. And it's usually like very faint. I want to say negative 13th, or sorry, yeah, not negative, positive 13th magnitude. So very, very faint. But right about now, Z, it could be visible naked eye, depending on how dark your sky is. And and if not, naked eye, probably binoculars. So poke around in here if you can. Find a nice map, space.com. Um, they tend to have good maps for that kind of thing. The Sky Tonight, those kinds of websites. Um, but yeah, if you're out looking for the Perseid meteor shower, look up in here and see if you can see that new star, that recurring nova. So again, it's called RS Ophiuchus. So RS is just the star designation. Um, and it's about 500 light years away. Sorry, just kidding. 5,000 light years away. If it's 500 light years away, it would look a lot brighter. It's about 5,000 light years away. So that's more distant than most of the stars we see in the night sky. Most of these stars, again, are within a few hundred light years, and there's just a handful that we see that are part of the major constellations that are out around a few thousand light years. So 5,000 is pretty distant for a star that we can see. So it's kind of cheating when it's a nova, but but it's still out there. It is a recurring nova, so people have been noticing this one. So every 15 years or so, it blasts off. So the last one was in 2006, the last time it blasted off. And so we're expecting it to do again in about 15 years. So if you're into variable stars, new stars, that kind of thing, this is fun. If you've never seen a nova, that's a fun one to look for. The other one that I believe I've mentioned a few times because it like last I checked, it still hadn't faded, and it's actually in Stellarium. um, is that Novae and Cassiopeia. So if we look up into Cassiopeia, um, I was finding it by looking for M52, this what Stellarium calls the salt and pepper cluster. So we're kind of looking in the plane of the Milky Way. So there's lots of other kind of clusters and fun things, bright stellar background. But also, if we zoom in here, we should see yeah, see, it's actually labeled in here. So if you have Stellarium on your phone, which I do, it's great. You can take your phone app out there, or you can hunt down M52. So this cluster over here, this is M52. This nebula probably won't show up so well, but M52 in a dark sky, that should show up in binoculars and or telescope. And then the nova is kind of the brightest thing around, a little bit brighter even. It may look a little bit brighter than these two stars even. So there's another nova, another new star to hunt down in our night sky. Again, because you should be out looking at the night sky tonight because it's the peak of the Perseids. So bring your bug spray, bring a blanket to lie on so you're not just, sitting and looking up because that gets really uncomfortable after about 15 seconds. And yeah, that's that's our tour of Novae and non-Novae for tonight. Because I'm gonna go out and maybe look for some shooting stars myself and just, get out of town in general. So a little bit of a short tour tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Again, I'm Irene Pease, your friendly neighborhood astronomer. You can check out the other fun things I'm doing. Check out my weekly overview of what's up in the night skies. You can check that on my YouTube channel, and I try to remember to link it on my website, but sometimes I forget to update the website. If you have questions, comments, requests for any of these, feel free to drop me a note. And again, just the visuals, credits for the visuals tonight. We use OpenSpace. Highly recommend that. You can find that at openspaceproject.com. And I'm going to have to check out this Redshift that John recommended on the iPad. And then also, of course, Stellarium. I have Stellarium on my desktop and pretty much all my devices because it's super handy like that. Thanks, everyone. Clear skies. Be safe out there. If you haven't been vaccinated and you can, please go get vaccinated.